year was 1775. For more than 10 years, tensions had been building between the new King of England and his troublesome children in America. Before King George had become their monarch, the colonists had essentially been left to themselves. Without the meddling of England, they had been free to experiment with new ideas of liberty and self-government. Now they had a king who was starting to pay attention to them and attempting to enforce his many new rules and regulations. The colonists bristled at the notion that they would have to submit to these new laws. What made them even more upset were the removal of many colonial self-governing privileges and their lack of representation in British government. Adding to these upsetting developments, the thought of leaving behind the newfound ideas on liberty became unthinkable. The longer these tensions continued, the more united the 13 colonies became in their common struggle. Even though Americans were angered by their king's heavy-handed tactics, most still considered themselves to be English. Talk of separation was nonetheless starting to increase. The conditions in Boston, for example, had become nearly unbearable with the recent arrival of 4,000 British soldiers. It seemed King George's sole purpose was to make life miserable for the colonists. On the morning of April 19, 1775, tensions erupted into violence. Americans had been secretly organizing for some time. They had gathered a stockpile of weapons, anticipating the possibility of bloodshed. When British troops from Boston made an all-night forced march to confiscate these weapons in the tiny hamlets of Concord and Lexington, they were surprised, even shocked, to see an armed group of citizens awaiting their pre-dawn arrival. The men standing in the town square at Lexington were called Minutemen. Trained citizens willing to drop whatever they were doing and answer the call to respond. The British Army had come under the cloak of darkness to take away their arms. It was time to take a stand. The bloody events of that day became known as the famous Shot Heard Round the World. Freedom-loving people the world over saw a small band of citizens stand tall and put fear in the eyes of the mighty British Army. There were many unnamed heroes that early morning who made a choice to get out of bed and make a stand against oppression. One such courageous man became a national folk hero. Paul Revere was one of the volunteers who secretly slipped out of Boston late the night before to alert the locals that the British regulars were on the march. His all-night ride throughout the countryside to awaken the citizenry earned him a special spot in American history. Revere had inherited his great love of liberty from his parents, who had fled to America because of religious persecutions. He would later serve with distinction as a colonel in the Continental Army and in the framing of the United States Constitution.